This is a short presentation about how I make sunflower seed and soybean tempeh. There are certainly other, much more professionally made videos out there on this topic, but I've made this video because I think my method is a bit unique because of the very simple and inexpensive incubator design that I use. So if you're not familiar with tempeh, tempeh is a traditional soy food of Indonesia. The Wikipedia article about tempeh is a good place to start if you want an introduction to this food. Traditional Indonesian tempeh is made from dehulled soybeans that are soaked in water, boiled, drained, inoculated with the tempeh fungus, shaped into a cake, and incubated for about a day. The fungus binds the soybeans into a durable cake, which can be sliced, cooked, traditionally by frying. I guess that you could consider tempeh to be the original veggie burger. Making tempeh with soybeans is traditional, but I recommend beginners start with sunflower seeds, simply because it's easier. And that's a picture of sunflower seed tempeh at the bottom of the slide. So I'm going to go through the steps of making sunflower seed tempeh first and describe making soybean tempeh at the end of the presentation. So for this batch, I started with a cup of just raw sunflower seeds and a half cup of roasted, no salt sunflower seeds to give the tempeh a bit more of a toasty flavor. I wouldn't go above that ratio though. I've tried making tempeh from straight roasted, no salt sunflower seeds, and the toasty flavor was just too strong. So put the sunflower seeds in water and boil for at least 30 minutes. Now, if you are boiling dehulled soybeans, at this step it'd probably be an hour, but I think a half hour is fine for sunflower seeds. So while the sunflower seeds are cooking, you have to set up the incubator, and this is kind of the unique part of my presentation. Well, this is the heart and soul of my incubator design, a $5 Sunbeam electric skillet that we got at a thrift store. The skillet is used about half full of water, and the container containing the incubating tempeh floats on the water. This old skillet has excellent temperature control. Now you might have to go to more than one thrift store to find one that has this good of temperature control, but mine has just almost perfect temperature control. The incubation takes place in just a standard plastic food container that has holes drilled in the top, maybe every inch or two, and it also contains inside pieces of what are called plastic canvas that you can buy at almost any hobby store. Now, I should say that everything needs to be clean, and when I say clean, I mean washed with soap and water, using a fresh, clean dish rag, not one that's been fermenting in the sink for a few days, and either allowed to air dry or dried with a fresh towel. Your hands need to be clean too. Well, fill the skillet about half full with water and cover and put a thermometer in the water. The goal is to find the setting on the skillet that corresponds closely to human body temperature, 37 to 40 degrees Celsius. You'll notice that I had to drill a little hole in the cover so that the thermometer could dip down into the water. So here the temperature is 40 degrees Celsius, maybe a degree or two higher than I'd like, but acceptable. Well, after the sunflower seeds have been boiled, you drain them into a sieve, and then you you cover them and let them cool for maybe 30 minutes. Now let's set up the incubation chamber. Put a few strips of plastic canvas on the bottom of the container so air can get to the bottom of the tempeh, and then put in the bottom and the sides. Doing it this way, it gives a path for oxygen to reach all parts of the developing tempeh. When you have a tempeh failure, it's often because not enough oxygen could get to the entire cake. Because when it really starts growing, actually the cake will be warm just from its own biological activity at the end. So you put the boiled and cooled sunflowers and drained sunflower seeds onto a clean dish towel. This is an extra step that I take that many people don't take. Again, the dish towel has to be clean and not previously used since washing. Then you roll up the dish towel and you knead it a little. Again, that's to get the last bit of that surface water off. Again, tempeh failures happen most often because the seeds are just too wet. Now, put the seeds back in the original cooking pot. And for a batch this size, I would use a half teaspoon of tempeh starter. I get mine from tempeh.info, which is in Belgium, or Cultures for Health, which is in South Dakota. I think tempeh.info is currently, because of the coronavirus thing, not shipping to outside of Europe. But anyway, it's a good place to get it when they're shipping. And you have to mix the seeds and the starter very well. Mix, 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 mix. Make sure that that starter gets well distributed. Put the inoculated seeds in the chamber. Put on the lid. Float the chamber on the water, and cover the rest of the water surface with aluminum foil. Now, I like to start a batch of tempeh. I like to inoculate at about 5 p.m. so that it needs a little. If it needs a little extra time, I'll be done. It'll be done before bedtime for sure. And there you have it: sunflower seeds that have bound it together into a cake. Pan fried, it makes it just an excellent sandwich with all of your favorite condiments and vegetables. I like jalapeno sauce and chipotle sauce. Now, a few notes about making soybean tempeh. You know, the steps are exactly the same as for sunflower seed tempeh, but the seeds need to be dehulled. Now, there's a wet method and a dry method. I use the dry method because I have a piece of equipment. I find it easiest to crack the dry seeds with a grain mill, and I'll show you pictures of this in a minute, so that each seed is broken into 3 or 4 pieces, and then blow off the hulls on a windy day or just using a fan. But if you don't have a grain mill, the traditional way in Indonesia is to soak the seeds overnight, so they're all swollen, and then you put the seeds in a pot of water with a small stream of water flowing into the pot, and you knead the grains with your hands, and then the hulls will float off, and the rest of it will stay in the bottom. So there's both a wet and a dry way of doing this, but I use the dry method. Now, there really isn't, as far as I know, a special type of soybean used for tempeh. It's not like tofu beans. There is a special tofu bean and a special natto bean, but plain old food grade soybeans are just fine. Any food grade soybean will do. Now, this is an old-fashioned Corona hand mill. You notice that I'm using the metal plates and not the grinding stones. And that plate has to be fairly wide open so that you only want to crack the soybeans into 3 or 4 pieces. Now, here's the cracking process. You'll need to experiment with that gap just to make sure that no whole soybeans are getting through. That would be too far open. Or if you're starting to make soybean flour, then the plates are too tight. So I use a fan, and you just pick up and drop the mixture in front of the sand, and then the hulls blow off, and then the insides fall down. You're going to have to do that 3 or 4 times to get rid of all of the hulls. So these are the meats or whatever, the cracked insides of the soybeans, and this is what you make the tempeh out of. Again, you're going to want to boil that for at least an hour before draining and cooling and inoculating. And these are the hulls, and gosh, they have a high nitrogen content. It would be good on any garden or good in any compost pile. And the tempeh fungus, of course, was developed for soybeans, and it grows lusciously. It grows quite lusciously on soybeans. The tempeh fungus just loves soybeans. And a few final notes. Don't eat raw tempeh. It is always eaten cooked. Tempeh freezes well. Now, I like to cut it into smaller pieces, boil in water for a few minutes, drain, and then freeze. And it keeps for weeks in the freezer, no problem, if you blanch it in boiling water first. Now, if the incubation goes a little bit too long, the fungus will start to sporulate, and you'll start to see little black spores. that's fine. It's no problem. And the only thing I would say is don't eat anything that doesn't look like tempeh. For example, let's say you're not getting enough air to the bottom of the cake, and the tempeh fungus, it grows on the top, but it doesn't grow on the bottom. Well, you don't want to eat that. If the tempeh fungus didn't grow and the cake looks wet, that's contaminated with bacteria. And again, I think it goes on your compost pile. Just don't eat anything that doesn't look like tempeh. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I know this wasn't very professionally made, but that's how I make tempeh. And thanks for watching.